On our morning show today from WRCO, we have State Senator Howard Marklein representing the 17th Senate District, our guest here in the studio, and along with Representative Tony Kurtz of the 41st Assembly District. Good to have you both back here today. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Have not heard your names bandied about running for governor next year yet, though.
It's early.
You don't have to worry about that.
No,
I'll make that announcement right now. I'm not running for governor.
Officially.
Breaking news. No.
We've heard a lot about the Democratic candidates, but are there Republicans? I mean, you got a couple have stepped forward, right?
We got Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman and then Congressman Tom Tiffany from the 7th Congressional have both announced. Yep.
Mm-hmm. For a primary next year.
Yep.
Well, lots of things going on here. We're getting into a hunting season. Howard, do you guys hunt, by the way?
Yeah.
You both
Definitely.
do?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Been bow hunting, not as much as I would like. Of course, you never hunt as much as you like, but I haven't had any success yet, or haven't shot anything yet. So, but I might try to get out maybe a day or afternoon yet this week. So, but looking forward to the gun season starts on Saturday, and it's an incredible tradition in our state, and also just incredible economic impact that it has in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, it's just people, and I don't have to travel too far to hunt, so it's not a big deal for me. But there's a lot of people, traveling, around it, and they spend some pretty big money on this next week.
That leads us into a question. I know you both were talking about a possible hunting bill about people visiting the state to hunt, right?
Yeah, so the Fish and Wildlife account in the DNR is underwater. We're spending about $15 million more annually than what we take in hunting and fishing fees. And so Tony Kurtz and I have authored a bill that would increase the non-resident hunting and fishing licenses. And, I hunt out of state periodically. And, I look at what I pay for hunting fees, out of state compared to what non-residents pay to the state of Wisconsin. And there's just no comparison. So anyway, this bill would help the Fish and Wildlife account, and it wouldn't have any impact at all on our resident hunters and anglers and stuff. But, and when you think about it, as I just mentioned, the people that are coming from Illinois, up north to hunt, that license fee is a very, very, very minor part of the cost of their trip and stuff. So I don't think it's going to deter somebody from coming to the state of Wisconsin to hunt deer or fish, for that matter.
Indeed. Tony, anything you want to say about hunting?
No, just to Howard's point, it's not, the Fish and Wildlife account, obviously when you get your hunting license or a fishing license, that goes into a segregated account, and that's what Senator Marklein was talking about. But one of the things that we pay from that account is all, the game warden staff. And so that's a large draw off of that account. And of course, game wardens are not just enforcing hunting and fishing regulations, but that's the biggest draw from that account. And so these fees are not... we can talk about some fees later on that actually we push back on the livestock fees. That's something that was good news there. But anyway, the hunting fees, it for the non-residents, once again, non-residents. So, somebody coming from Minnesota that's going to deer hunt, something like that, they're not exorbitant. They're like $10 or $20, depending on the license. So, to Howard's point, this is not going to deter somebody from coming to the state. I know we had some outfitters that kind of were a little concerned, but in the big scheme of things, for what people come, and this area is getting to be big trout. I mean, it's getting to be, we have people from all over the country come here to trout fish, and that's something that obviously we want to continue that. But these fees are just to help stabilize the Fish and Wildlife account until we look at something longer term to figure out how we help with that account.
Farming wise, yeah, you mentioned that you've had a chance to make a little progress there.
I finished last night.
You're on the farm personally, so that means you can hunt more, right?
But several shows ago, we talked about DATCAP, Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. We're going to raise some horribly exorbitant fees on people that deal with livestock, that transport livestock, and that's one of the things that Senator Marklein and I talked about, that you needed to contact that, because that's. We don't have rulemaking authority anymore. And so luckily, DATCAP has pulled that back. They're going to be very modest fee increases, not the exorbitant fees like they were on some of the livestock people. We're going to have to pay like $1,700 increase, 1,700% increase. Some of the people that truck livestock, there's about 1,000 people statewide that do that. Their fees were going to go up like 500%. So fortunately, the outreach from farmers and the communities stopped that, and that's a good thing, because those fees were way out of line for what they were proposing.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the government was shut down for a little bit. Things kind of getting back to normal now a little bit, Howard?
Well, from the state standpoint, I don't know that there's a whole lot of impact. There's some data that the Department of Revenue gets and distributes, for us. But I mean, the state government was working. I don't know that from a state standpoint there was a whole lot of impact. At this point. So at least I didn't hear a whole lot. I think the bigger concern was more from people, recipients of SNAP benefits and that sort of thing, and the uncertainty, that was going on there. So, but I think everybody's glad it's over. When I think about, the politics, I think what happened in Washington, D.C. is kind of politics at its worst. It just shut down for a long time for what, and it was political, and which I think is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. You talked about revenue numbers before we went on the air. Would you go over some of those and how they look?
Yeah, so the Department of Revenue, and then through the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, releases their revenue numbers periodically. And for the first quarter of the year, it takes them a while because they're closing out the books. We end our year on June 30th. It takes them a few months, the Department of Revenue, to reconcile things from the prior year end. So we don't get the first quarter revenue numbers until quite a while later on. But we did get the first quarter. So this is actual through September 30th, 2025 compared to actual September 30th, 2024. And I'm looking at these, the headline numbers here. Individual income taxes are up 8.1%. Sales tax up 6.2%. Overall revenue for the state's up over 6%. And that is unrealistic, I think. And I've raised some questions about this, like individual income taxes really are driven by people's withholding, and so I asked the question, did the hours go up or did the pay rates go up? And they really haven't come up with a good response to that question yet, but it doesn't appear that the hours worked in the state of Wisconsin is up significantly. Pay rates are up, but I don't know if they're up over 8%. So anyway, and as the more we asked about this, they kind of admit, too, that this is a little bit optimistic, which is kind of unfortunate because this is actual. This isn't projections, or this is actual. And I would think there would be some pretty easy ways to figure out, kind of the reasons, underlying reasons for why the revenue's up. But it's my understanding October is going to be a little softer, which will cut into this amount here. So anyway, again, I heard, some people saw this and were like, oh my God, we're going to have a lot more money than we anticipated. Well, I don't think, I'm cautioning my colleagues, don't go spending it yet, because I don't think it's going to continue at nearly this pace. In fact, it might go the other way a little bit in the coming months. So, and we also, I'll be watching this here over the next probably 45 days or so. Christmas holidays coming up, big impact on our, especially our sales tax collections. See how people are shopping and that sort of thing, and even we were talking offline about the Packers and stuff. So, you know, it's interesting how the Packers do affects sales tax and people shopping, buying that jersey or that sweatshirt or whatever for Christmas, and if the Packers make the playoffs, what impact that it does. It just and of course it doesn't look like the Badgers are going to be football team's going to be going anywhere, so we won't have that to rely on here from the budget standpoint. But anyway, a lot of stuff to watch.
Yeah, people are in better moods on Mondays, especially.
Oh yeah, especially when they win. But you know, to Howard's point, it might sound kind of silly, but when the Brewers do well, you know, they did very well, you know, to get into the National League Championship. I mean, they really laid an egg, but I mean, my point is, though, that actually helps the state's economy. And so the better the Packers do, it actually does help.
Indeed. Last time you were here, I know we got done and you said, hey, we didn't even talk about schools, you know, and I think we didn't. So we let you off last month, but school consolidation, Tony, that's been in the news here again.
No, there's going to be a couple bills that we're going to take up on Wednesday. So the Senate is state Senate's on Tuesday. We are on the floor on Wednesday, and it's just some bills to look at. And to be very honest, it's just to get the conversation going. I mean, you and I, we've talked about this on air many times. You know, in the last 10 years, there's 60,000 less K-12 students today than there was 60 years ago. When you look at the UW system, there's approximately 16,000 less, you know, UW students than there was 10 years ago. And I know some people say, well, it's funding. It also has everything to do with the number of kids that the birth rates. And I mentioned before, you know, in the 60s, I was born in 1966. The birth rate was basically 25 babies for every 1,000 women per year. That birth rate now is 10 babies for every 1,000 women. So the birth rates are drastically lower, and so we're actually seeing that in our numbers. Recently, when you talk about just schools in general, I know Baraboo just announced, you know, Platteville announced that Baraboo is going to be closing. That's something, to be very honest, that's something that we saw was going to happen because, once again, it's the enrollment numbers. There's just not enough kids to, you know, the footprint of UW, all the two-year campuses, et cetera, that footprint, you know, that number of kids, that's shrinking, but yet the footprint is still, you know, a large size footprint, and that has to be downsized a little bit. And that's the thing about our K-12 education. We just need to have a discussion on something like that how does that look like moving forward? Because, you know, I think having small districts are good, but yet, you know, they take a lot of resources. And on the other side of that is Milwaukee. Milwaukee Public School District is the largest school district, and unfortunately probably the worst in the state. I don't think being necessarily that big is a good thing either. And so looking at the size and what's that sweet spot in that.
Wasn't it true, though, it was announced this year before the school year that Milwaukee district gets a bigger piece of the pie, or they're you know, what was up with that?
Well, this is interesting, and Senator Marklein can probably talk about it too. When the way they do the equalization aid formula, basically the lower your property values, you get a larger chunk of state aid. For instance, Milwaukee gets probably anywhere about 75 to 76% of their budget comes from the state. Mauston is very similar to that. It's very poor, property poor. You know, a district that's property rich, you know, like, Wisconsin Dells, for instance. Wisconsin Dells is a property rich district. They only get like 38% of their funding from the state, whereas, once again, Mauston gets about 76%. When Milwaukee passed their referendum a few years ago, it was a $253 million referendum. To your point, that actually takes money, equalization aid money, from all the other districts that have high aid requirements, like a Mauston, like a Richland Center. So yes, when Milwaukee did that thing, it actually hurt all our school districts around the state, particularly some in our district. And I can get you that report. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau actually did a report on what that referendum actually cost the state when Milwaukee did that.
Yeah, Howard, would you like to comment?
Yeah, you know, on the Milwaukee thing, I guess that was very disappointing. And I serve on the legislative audit committee, and not the joint audit committee. And in Milwaukee, what happened was they had a referendum that for $253 million, a huge referendum in April of 2024, I believe it was. And they didn't have their audit report. Nothing was filed with the DPI before the referendum. Okay, so here you've got the biggest school district in the state of Wisconsin, and you could ask a school board member, like, where do we stand financially? They couldn't tell you because they didn't have the audit report, And so they went to the public and asking for all this money. And the voters, and I don't think the voters understood that they didn't even have their audit reports. They've been, incredibly late. And again, out here, we are pretty conscientious. When the state tells you got to have your audit report filed by, I think it's November 15th, we file it. We get our audits done, we file them with the DPI. Well, Milwaukee, they went to referendum. They didn't even have their audit report from last year. And the referendum passed by 1,700 votes in the city, in Milwaukee School District, which is pretty thin margin. And then subsequent to that referendum passing, this huge referendum passing, the DPI probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks later says, we don't even have their audit report for last year, and we're going to ding them on their state aids to Milwaukee Public School System. And from what I heard in Milwaukee from people, they were very upset because had they known the financial situation and how poor their management was in Milwaukee, they probably wouldn't have supported the referendum at all. So anyway, we last week, the Legislative Audit Committee, we had an audit done of the Department of Public Instruction to find out what was the process like in Madison. Like what in Madison, if you didn't get, I know that out here, if Ithaca didn't file their audit report by the due date, Ithaca would have gotten notified, and there would have been some communication there about, hey, you better get your act together. And I don't think there was a whole lot going on between the DPI and Milwaukee, and I don't know if they turned a blind eye to what was going on as far as being so late in filing that audit report. So anyway, the nonpartisan Legislative Audit Bureau is going to be doing an audit, kind of figuring out what happened, what's going on with the communication, and as Tony said, if Wazeeka-Steuben files their report late, it has no impact on the state of Wisconsin because Wazeeka-Steuben is such a small dollar amount compared to the rest of the state. When Milwaukee Public School System has a hiccup, everybody is affected by it, either negatively or positively, potentially. And so it was concerning to the members of the audit committee. It's like, we have to, DPI has got to pay a little closer attention to Milwaukee and making sure those reports are filed on time. So anyway, looking forward to that audit, and that'll be months down the road probably.
Some of the school districts, though, were impacted, and I mean, you're planning on a certain budget, and all of a sudden you're not going to get that money. I mean, is there anything that can be done in terms of taking steps to reimburse the money that they were expecting, or is there anything in line for that?
I believe in the end it's going to balance out, because I think the following year there's going to be a balancing effect. And as far as the size of the district's budget, the amount of money that you can spend in Boscobel, it's probably, that wouldn't be affected. What would be affected is the state aids that come in that affect your property taxes. Okay, and I think the following year, I think that's going to level. The following years, I think it's going to level out with the. I'm almost positive that that's going to be the net impact. Is that? But that means people may have had to pay more in property taxes for their schools this year, which it's nobody likes the comfort of saying, well, next year you're going to get a little bit of a break. Well, that doesn't help you when you got to write a check this year.
Right, exactly. Tony, anything you wanted to add?
No, but to Howard's point, that referendum was April of 2024, and then Fiscal Bureau, they actually did a paper on March of 2024 showing what the impact would be, and that's something. I mean, I've got it right here. I can email it to you, and you guys can. And if you want to put it on your website, it would kind of show you what we're looking at as well, and how it cost all these districts around the state money.
Sure. Okay. Very well. We'll have more in a moment with Senator Marklein and Representative Kurtz on our morning show for a Monday. Welcome back to our morning show here on WRCO Radio. Good to have you back in the studio with us. State Senator Howard Marklein is in with us, along with Representative Tony Kurtz. And we wanted to talk a little bit about some other things going on. Road improvements, that's been in the news here lately, the ARIP bill, and you guys were instrumental in that. Howard, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so, a couple of last, budget, we put together this agricultural road improvement program, and which has been very successful. And we were able to fund that again in the last budget, and we're making a couple of tweaks to it. Right now, the way the program stands is you have to, and the ARIP is for, I would say, for the most part, town roads and maybe some county roads that agriculture uses, and timber. That includes timber up in the northern part of the state. And so in order to qualify for these grants for these local roads, they had to post the roads. And what happened was some townships would post the road only to qualify for the grant. And then when they didn't get the grant, then now they ended up with a posted road, which probably wasn't the best thing for the farms, in that area. So the bill that we have circulating right now, and I think we'll get it passed here shortly, is would allow for an engineering evaluation saying basically this road is not suitable for carrying the agricultural traffic that is on it right now. So they can do that in lieu of posting it and still qualify for ARIP. But the grant program is open right now for $50 million, and again, we've had some good projects, around the state. I was with the highway commissioner down in Greene County a couple of weeks ago, and he showed me the projects they've got. And again, it's going to make some impact again on some of these town roads and stuff that don't qualify for anything else, any special kinds of programs.
Lots of them in your area, Tony.
Well, Juneau County received one. I know County O here is. That wasn't an ARIP, but that's something that Senator Marklein and I got money in the budget last session, and obviously the governor signed it to help with County O. That was a long overdue project, so it was nice to see that come to fruition. But the other thing that I'm kind of excited about, the little tweak we did on the ARIP is, so last budget we provided money to do a culvert survey around the state. Basically, any culvert under 20 feet is actually, there's no funding assistance to help replace those. And so I know over the last several years, all the counties and all the townships were kind of doing a culvert inventory to see which ones need to be replaced. And part of the money from the ARIP program can now actually be used to help with replacement of culverts, because if you talk to any town supervisor or anybody who works on the county, these culverts, it takes quite a bit of resources to replace those, and some are decades old, so they just need to be looked at, but then also some assistance to help replace them.
We never like road construction,
no.
But when it gets done, like County O, for instance, making progress, that's a good thing.
And over the last several budget, I know I'm very proud of it. I know Senator Marklein's very proud of it. We have had a lot of bipartisan support to put a lot of money into infrastructure. And one thing I think has bode well is, yes, you're seeing the projects get done. I know I still see a lot of comments that, the roads are still bad. It just takes time. We've put a lot of money behind those, but you got to think you only have X number of crews that can actually go out and do all the work. And just like we've talked before on air about the workforce in general, there's a lot of shortage of work, but there's a lot of shortage of road crews and aggregate for all that, et cetera. And so I think you're going to continue to see that investment in our infrastructure. We need to, or we're overdue. And obviously Highway 14 is another big project that needs to get done. But I think you're going to see those continued investments. So I was happy to see how we did kind of tweak the ARIP so that culverts would be covered to a certain point.
Howard, you were in the news this week about butter. That's been in the news, and trying to get it into our schools. I figured that all schools in Wisconsin use real butter, but that's not the case, huh?
Well, that's what I thought too, until Representative Novak and I went to a Farm Bureau annual meeting a couple months ago, and one of the dairy farmers there brought in the packets of margarine that their son brought home from school. The school was one in your listening area. School in your listening area was serving margarine with their lunches, and of course, that really, if you're a dairy farmer, that kind of irritates you, And it did. I mean, that was at that meeting that night. There were a lot of people pretty upset about that. So, anyway, so Todd Novak and I ended up drafting a bill, and it's being circulated now for co-sponsorships. Basically, it's, saying, listen, other than maybe for a allergy reason or whatever, you need to serve butter, in our schools. So, because like in prisons, you can't serve margarine. We mandate that in Boscoville at the prison, they don't serve margarine, they serve butter, and anyway, so I would, hope that, most districts would be, especially in these rural areas, there's a lot of dairy farmers, they pay a lot of taxes, and I think, geez, it's just kind of a poke in the eye, when they serve margarine and not butter. So anyway, we'll see where it goes. I'm not going to die on that hill, but it's one of those things sometimes that just kind of irritates you. And it's like, what were you thinking?
You need to get a bill about butter on popcorn at these high school games too, because some schools do, but some of it's fake. So.
There you go. Well, Tony, you want to
work on that, Tony?
I'm making a note right now.
Sholzberg always has real butter, and I think Ithaca does too. But
do you know who has bad popcorn?
Bad popcorn? No, I don't.
Nobody.
Oh, you like all of it? Okay, that's probably true, I would guess. How about data centers? We haven't asked you about that. What's your feeling on that? What's the latest on these data centers that have been making news? Howard?
I've visited one in the Milwaukee area, and the one I visited, I mean, nobody knows that's even there. It's a building, and it was in a urban area, and nobody even knows it's there. So and it was interesting tour, interesting visit to see what goes on. But they take it's a lot of power, and that's you got to have reliability of power, and then. Like the one in Milwaukee, I mean, and from what I've heard, a lot of these are from a water standpoint, it's a closed loop cooling system, and they do generate heat. And one of the reasons they are becoming popular around here is that for half the year, their cooling is free. It's cold. And they love that. That's why, I don't know that you're going to be seeing too many built in Louisiana, where it's a lot hotter and stuff. So, but I don't know. It's new, and I think anytime you've got any new kind of technology and stuff, I think, I think the industry, their industry, really wants to really get rolling on this stuff. But I think there's just a lot of information, a lot of unknowns out there, in terms of. And I think most people are concerned about environment and that sort of thing, water impact. And from what I gathered, there really isn't, too much of an impact there, assuming they use a closed loop cooling system. But, what is the impact going to be to local taxes? I mean, they're getting revenue, and, is it worth it? And that's going to be a decision a lot of the locals are going to have to make as they negotiate with these developers.
What have you heard, Tony?
I've had a lot of briefings. I have not toured one, but I mean, there's a lot more in the state than people realize, and they have been in the state, and there's a lot more projects. I just think, to Howard's point, there's been a lot of. I don't want to say they're. All the comments you see on Facebook or Instagram and all this stuff, I just think people need to get the facts. And I know that a lot of things I've seen is they are closed loop systems. So they use a set amount of water. That's the water they keep cycling. It stays in that system. As far as the power grid, I know our grid has been improving over the year, but they're also responsible for what they're using on that grid. And to Howard's point, our climate, as much as so many people don't like being here in the winter, it's actually one of the reasons why they want to, because of the cooling. It does save money. And so I think you're going to see this case by case. It's just what does concern me is the fact that communities are already coming out so strongly against them, and they can do that as a community, but I just hope they're relying on actual facts and not things that are very I don't want to say made up, but things that are kind of outrageous in my opinion. So,
EMS bills, we've talked about them on the program. Any updates?
No, we've had Howard and I were very proud. I know last time we were both on, we were talking about some of the EMS bills that we had to help with EMS. One was with training. Also, one was with if you didn't transport a patient. Both of those got signed into law. I've actually seen some stories recently where that's already actually making an impact on the bottom line on EMS providers. I know here EMS has been a pretty significant issue and some issues with that. I know tonight there's a meeting. My staff is actually going to go to that tonight. There's another bill that Senator Marklein and I are working to establish basically EMS districts. Right now you're kind of limited on county lines. This would make it where you can go across county lines. I think that too is another avenue that I know we're going to take that up in the Assembly here shortly, and I know the Senate's probably hopefully will take that up too. That just gives providers another option on making a district and everything. It has to be more than 8 municipalities would have to join together, but the big thing is you could go across county lines. And so anything we can do. I also want to emphasize, so last budget, we used to be it's called a funding assistance program that helps with EMS. That's something that the state has done for years. That funding was only at $2.2 million. The last budget and part of the Act 12 with the shared revenue, that went from $2.2 million to $25 million. I mean, that really infused a lot of money into EMS providers all over the state, but particular in our area. So there's been a lot of emphasis on EMS, but there's been a lot of money, but there's a tremendous amount of cost to make sure when you dial 911 that someone's going to show up.
Not always is EMS or ambulance service a requirement with all the municipalities and counties, though, Howard, right?
No, it's not, and there was they had a situation up in northwest Wisconsin where a couple of the very rural area, and they were having challenges having a provider provide ambulance services to that township, and they're going to have to raise the taxes significantly to pay for the EMS, and the voters said no, and so. It was going to be so if you dialed 911, I think they were coming out of Ashland, I believe, and it was going to be over an hour, till an ambulance got there. So, it's most people when we dial 911, we want somebody to respond, somebody to show up, and we have that now out here, and there's an awful lot of volunteers that around here that make that service possible. And I'm just so grateful, both fire and EMS. I mean, when you think about, we talked about this just recently, about what the cost would be if we had to pay, for full-time services for both, fire and EMS. I mean, those volunteers are providing an incredible service, and they're saving the taxpayers an awful lot of money.
But there has been talk lately about more full-time ambulance crews in southwest Wisconsin, hasn't there?
Yeah. And and I think that in some areas it may make sense. I've got Platteville in my district, and they've got and they're expanding their service out of Southwest Health. It's a paramedic service, and Cuba City is probably 7 miles away from the in fact even less to the hospital, and so Cuba City having their own department, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense when they can be served by a paramedic service just a short distance away. So and Tony's point too about looking at these structures and the flexibility, because when you think about it, we've got an awful lot of communities that are located near a county line, and now they don't have the flexibility to go across county lines and develop more of a regional service area. So again, Cuba City is basically on the county line down in Grant County and in Lafayette County.
We're fortunate to have the first responders. Some of those are.
Well, you mentioned about a lot of our EMS providers. We have really relied on the volunteers. Where, to your point, there's a lot of services that are going full time, especially in our rural area. That's why you're seeing the costs go up, okay? Because now you're paying somebody, wages, the whole 9 yards, but also equipment costs. I mean, an ambulance it's staggering how much an ambulance costs. I mean, and facilities and the whole 9 yards, and just like everybody else knows over the last several years, the inflationary pressures, and I think that's why you're seeing the increase with the need for EMS and also the dollar value, how that has gone up. But as to your point about the volunteer firefighters, we have really benefited from them giving back to our community. And that's why I know something that Howard and I always talk about is if you have the ability to volunteer on a fire department, please do, because they need you. I mean, it's something, it's a tradition, and unfortunately, like a lot of volunteerism, it's kind of, I don't know necessarily have the people, or people are just so busy these days, but we just don't have those type of volunteerism like we did several years ago.
A design bill, we've talked about that, and you can see all the progress made on that Lone Rock Bridge. That's a beauty in that bridge, and I think you'd like to see projects like that sped up in the future as well, Howard.
Right. So the design build concept for construction was something that we started as a pilot project a couple of budgets ago, and at that time we permitted up to 6 pilot projects around the state, $300 million. It was a cap on that process. The Lone Rock Bridge was the closest here, and probably the biggest in the state of Wisconsin. And what design build does is it compresses the time frame for doing the projects, because you'll be able to do multiple things as opposed to, and I like with the Lone Rock Bridge, and I was very, very familiar with that process, but under the traditional design bid build program, they would have to go through all of their archaeological assessments, environmental assessments separately, then look at real estate acquisition. And the real estate acquisition was going to take like a year and a half. And the acquisition was the DOT buying it from the DNR. And how the heck can that take like a year? Anyway, walk down the hall, kind of anyway. So, and then you go through all this. And so the Lone Rock Bridge, had we used the traditional construction process, the project would be done in 2028. And that bridge has been open now, and and I have talked to the contractors, the people, the DOT, the consultants, the unions, everybody on that project. And there were a few skeptics about this whole design build process, and is it going to work well? Is it going to be fair? And it worked fabulously. I didn't hear any complaints at all. So what we would like to do, and a bill that I've authored, and we're going to be voting on it tomorrow on the Senate floor, is to expand the use of design build, increase the dollar threshold, and then eliminate the cap on the 6 projects around the state. And again, it's not for doing your standard road, fixing a road. Okay, it's more complex projects that involve bridges, for example. The bridge project up in Superior, the Blotnick Bridge, I think it's going to be $1 billion, more over $1 billion project. And the Minnesota DOT is running that. They use design build. But most of our neighboring states use design build for these massive big projects and stuff, because they can condense the process. So anyway, we haven't heard any opposition, and I just think it makes sense to use this process selectively on some of these more complex projects, with the idea, keeping costs down, but more importantly to collapse the construction time, and a lot of times, like with road closures and detours and all that, time is money.
Yeah, most definitely. Child care licensing, that's been in the news lately. Tony?
Yeah, I know obviously we need a lot of child care providers. I know, like we talked earlier, there's a lot of shortages of child care providers. And so I know we've looked at the licensing requirements and how we can get more people into that space. I know those are things that, so we have, her name's Representative Gobin. She's very passionate about this. She used to be a child care provider in her previous life before she came to the Assembly. And I know that's something that she's leading on to make sure we can get more people into that field.
Child care is certainly important for all of us, Tony, and also Howard.
Yeah. So one of the bills we're going to be voting on tomorrow in the Senate is a bill that would expand the eligibility. The WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, has a grant program that permits businesses to access money for child care, but that money can only be used under current law, only be used for construction. And so the bill that I have authored and will be voting on tomorrow would expand that to operating costs as well. And the issue here, there's about $22 million in this account that we've appropriated that's not being used. So. And the business community wants to be able to not just construct, but to be able to operate the daycare facilities as well. So we're going to be making that change in that bill. Hopefully that'll go to the pass tomorrow in the Senate, and hopefully get over to the Assembly later this week.
Anything else tomorrow that's pressing? That you're looking at?
There's a lot of a whole bunch of bill. I mean, some of them are pretty kind of boring kind of stuff. Like, for example, I've got 8 or 9 bills that we'll be voting on tomorrow. One of them, maybe this is exciting to a CPA, but would eliminate 80 pages of obsolete tax credits, on the books. I mean, this stuff that, we don't use anymore, and it isn't often that as legislators we can reduce the size of the statutes, but tomorrow we'll be voting on something to eliminate. Again, this is all just I'm not going to go through if you want to put yourself to sleep, you ought to read that bill, Tony. That's really bad.
I'll take Cure for insomnia.
I'll take your word for it. No, on Wednesday we have a lot of housing packages. Like, to Howard's point, last session we allocated $525 million for housing around the state to help. And unfortunately, the vast majority of that is still sitting there. And so I know we're going to do some tweaks to make sure that actually gets used, because obviously housing is a huge issue. I know for this community, it's it is. When you did the strategic plan a couple years ago, that was the number one issue is the need for housing. And so hopefully we can streamline that process and get that money out the door. And the good thing about that is 30% of that is actually supposed to go to rural areas. And so that's something that we need to make a change about and make sure that money's getting used. Thanksgiving's coming up. Howard, you don't have to hunt for your turkey. I think you hunted at the county fair, didn't you?
I did. As Tony does, we attend a lot of our county fairs, and I think I bought a couple of hogs and did buy a turkey at the Iowa County Fair. So I met with the young man the other day, and he had it butchered and ready for the oven. So it's always fun just to support our youth like that, and that he was very active. He's very active in the FFA, and just good. These are good good, solid kids. I really am. It's a delight to support them.
Turkey or ham for Thanksgiving, Tony?
Oh, no, it's turkey. It's
Turkey.
Oh, yeah.
All right. You bought one too, then?
I bought one last year, but I didn't get a turkey this year. I got some ducks and I got a lot of goats, rabbits. It's been a good year. No, like to Howard's point, it is. It's wonderful to see how much pride they take into their projects. And like when we did the fair down here, just how much the community really gets behind. And I mean, it was a great fair this year. It was a great sale. And once again, that's good, and getting right back to our community, help those kids build those projects, and help with school, help with a lot of different things for these young men and women.
Happy Thanksgiving to both of you.
You as well, and
Thanks,
all
Phil.
of your listeners. Thank you.
You bet. Howard Marklein and Tony Kurtz, our guests during their monthly visit on WRCO. We'll have more coming up tomorrow on The Morning Show.